Mr. Dark Whispers.
When I was 12 years old, my mother had recently begun to trust me to stay home by myself. Our family lives in a peaceful and typically safe small town characterized by quiet streets, spacious yards, friendly neighbors, and a charming village center with various shops and restaurants. It's the kind of place where you do unfeel the need to constantly look over your shoulder at night. This inherent sense of security is a major reason my parents felt comfortable leaving me alone at such a young age. I still reside with them in that same house today. On the night of the incident, which was a weekend, my parents were leaving me home alone for the evening. When my older sister and I were younger, our grandparents would watch us, but on this occasion, my sister was not home. I was considered old enough to be trusted by myself. My parents, having had us at a young age, have always been more active, often traveling or going out with friends on weekends. They left me money for a pizza, creating what seemed like the perfect night for a 12-year-old. The house to myself, a night of video games, and pizza for dinner. I was deeply engrossed in James Bond video games at the time, playing a game called Nightfire on my PS2 for what was likely my third playthrough. After completing the game again, I decided to order the pizza. Our family's go-to spot was a local pizzeria called Johnny's, which was just a few blocks from our house but has since been closed for years. I ordered a regular pie, which at that age, I could easily eat 3 slices of by myself. My mom had instructed me to wrap any leftovers in tinfoil and put them in the fridge. While waiting for the delivery, I swapped the game disc for another one. When the doorbell finally rang, I rushed downstairs holding the $20 bill my parents had left me. My mom had told me to give a $4 tip, which was quite generous for the time, considering the pizza place was only 3 blocks away. The delivery driver was a man who appeared to be in his 30s, though he looked unkempt with a long, unpleasant beard, glasses, and a black trucker's hat. I handed him the $20 and requested the specific change for the tip. As he gave me the pizza box and counted out the change, he looked up, glanced past me into the house, and asked, "You alone here?" I recognized it as an odd and creepy question, and my parents had taught me to be cautious with strangers. My reply, in retrospect, was foolish. I said my parents were on their way home. I could have simply said no, but I knew he was asking because there were no cars in the driveway, and a child was answering the door. After he handed me the change, I closed the door, ate my 3 slices in the kitchen, and then wrapped and refrigerated the rest as instructed. I then went back upstairs to play my other James Bond game, Agent Under Fire, which I enjoyed less than Nightfire, but it was still good. Hours passed as I played. Around 11 p.m., the doorbell rang, assuming it was my parents. I hurried downstairs. Through the door, I called out, "Mom, Dad?" Unfamiliar voice responded, "Hey, I need help," and then added that he needed to use a phone. I asked, "Who is this?" And he just repeated his request to use a phone. I was scared and didn't want to look through the window. I decided to ignore him and go back upstairs, knowing from common sense that opening the door would be a terrible idea. As I was walking up the stairs, which are located directly in front of the door, the man outside began to bang on it and yelled, "Wait, please." This meant he had seen me. He must have been watching through the glass at the top of the door. I turned around, and although the porch was dark, I could see the outline of his head. Couldn't make out his eyes, but it was clear he was staring right back at me. I ran upstairs and into my parents' room, as it had the only upstairs house phone. I immediately called my mom's cell phone as I didn't have my dad's number memorized. My mom answered, likely having had a few glasses of wine, and I told her someone was at the door asking to come inside. Her tone shifted dramatically as she sobered up instantly, sounding louder and much more concerned. She asked if I had answered the man or made him aware I was home, and I truthfully said yes. She asked who it was, and her voice grew even more worried. She then asked if anyone could have known I was there alone, and I immediately thought of the delivery driver. I told her about the pizza guy's question. Around this time, the doorbell rang twice more. Panicked, telling my mom the man wouldn't leave. My mom instructed me to stay in her room and lock the bedroom door. She said they were calling the police using my dad's phone and had to step outside the restaurant to hear better. It was a summer night, and the windows in the house were cracked open for air. Through my parents' bedroom window, I heard the gate on the side of the house, which leads to the backyard, open very discreetly. I told my mom, and she repeatedly told me to stay quiet in their room with the lights off. I whispered into the phone, "What if he tries getting in through the den window?" My mom told me to stop talking and wait for the police. Continuing to give me updates on their ETA, I was starting to calm down slightly when I heard the distinct sound of footsteps downstairs. Someone was inside the house, walking around. I whispered this to my mom in a panic, and I heard her scream something to the police on the other phone, likely that the man was now inside. She told me to hide under the bed. For my 12-year-old self, it was the most horrific moment of my life. With only the small lock on my parents' bedroom door providing any sense of protection, I heard footsteps ascending the stairs. The stairs are near my and my sister's bedrooms, with my parents' room further down the hall. The footsteps paused, and I assumed the intruder was searching our rooms. My mom told me the police would force their way in and that I shouldn't move. The footsteps then continued down the hallway toward my parents' room. The doorknob was tried a few times, but it was locked. This was followed by a light knock, but the person said nothing. After trying the doorknob one last time, I heard the footsteps retreat down the hall, go down the stairs, and fade away into the house. I fought back tears the entire time, too scared to even whisper into the phone. My mom finally told me the police had arrived, but to stay put. I expected to hear them kick the door in, but instead, I suddenly heard multiple heavy footsteps and a man shouting my name, identifying himself as an officer. I heard them coming up the stairs, and my mom gave me permission to answer them. When I opened the door, there were 2 officers upstairs and 2 more downstairs. They hadn't needed to force the front door, because the back door was found wide open. The back sliding window was also slid open, which was the clear point of entry. I had to recount everything to the police, including my suspicion about the pizza delivery guy, with my parents listening on the phone. By the time my parents arrived home, only 2 officers remained. The police report included a note about the delivery driver, and they said they would investigate. The next night, my parents took me to Johnny's Pizzeria and asked me to point out the delivery man. When I didn't see him, they described him to the manager. The manager identified the employee as Phil, who was currently out on a delivery. After my parents explained the situation, the manager dismissed the possibility that it could be Phil and asked them to leave. My parents made a big scene, vowing to never give them business again. We then waited in the car in the parking lot for nearly an hour, but Phil never returned. My parents suspected the manager had warned him, but we'll never know for sure. They contacted a few lawyers who ultimately declined the case, citing a lack of solid evidence and calling it a waste of time. We never returned to that pizzeria, and it was a long time before my parents felt safe leaving me home alone again. I still believe it was the pizza guy, or an associate of his. No one else could have known I was alone that night. As a teenager, I moved with my parents from California to a remote area in North Idaho. My parents, recently retired, had built their dream home deep in the backcountry. We had no visible neighbors, only endless dense forests that bordered national parkland and logging grounds. The house itself was massive, featuring 2 stories, a gym, a full bar and pool room, and a legitimate movie theater in the basement. It felt like a dream home remote, quiet and seemingly perfect. At the time, I was dating my high school girlfriend. One night, while my parents were on a date downtown, I invited her over to watch a movie. We were completely alone. I cracked open a beer, figuring at my underage status, no one would mind, and we went down to the movie room to watch Gladiator. The evening began normally, but about halfway through the movie, around midnight, something shifted within me. I was suddenly hit with an overwhelming fight-or-flight sensation, as if my body sensed a threat my mind couldn't yet comprehend. My heart pounded, and I found myself repeatedly glancing at the uncovered windows behind us, which looked out into the pitch-black woods. To avoid alarming my girlfriend, I kept this feeling to myself. Though things became intimate between us during the movie, I couldn't shake the persistent feeling that we were being watched. After the movie, I walked her upstairs and out to her car. When she drove away, the house was dead quiet. As I turned to go back inside, I remembered I had left the lights on in the bar, pool room, and movie room. I went back downstairs, turned off the movie room lights first, and then paused. My eyes were drawn to the large window overlooking the backyard, and that's when I saw him. He was a man who looked homeless, with wild hair and filthy clothes. What froze me was his expression. The biggest, creepiest smile I had ever seen, paired with wide, staring, deranged eyes. In his hand, he held a knife, which he was gently tapping on the glass over and over. At first, I thought I was hallucinating. I slowly backed away and went to the bar room to turn off the remaining lights. That room had a sliding glass door that also faced the woods. As I flipped the switch, I watched in horror as the man calmly walked from the window to the door, maintaining his smile and stare. We were now less than a foot apart, separated only by the glass. He didn't try to get in, just stood there, watching me. I went upstairs without saying a word, just as my parents were walking in. I told them, I think I need to go to the psych ward or something. I swear I just saw a guy with a knife watching me outside. My mom's face went pale, and my dad's eyes narrowed. Without a word, he went to the gun safe, retrieved his rifle, and stormed outside to check the property. When I asked my mom what was happening, she revealed there had been several recent break-ins in the area by a man wandering the woods. My description matched him exactly. The police were called but found no signs of entry or footprints. Only the cold, dark woods. That should have been the end, but it wasn't. That night, as I tried to sleep in my second-floor bedroom, which was directly above the movie room, I heard a faint tapping sound from beneath me, like metal gently tapping glass. I tried to dismiss it. The tapping continued for hours and recurred night after night for weeks. Sometimes it would stop, other times I'd wake at 3 a.m. to hear it faintly again. One night, I even thought I heard footsteps on the roof. I checked the windows but never saw anyone, yet the feeling of being stalked persisted. When winter arrived, my parents had to go out of town for a few days. Still nervous, they left me with a shotgun for protection. We also had a large Rottweiler, a sweet dog that was always silent unless there was a real threat. One night while I was alone, I heard slow, heavy, deliberate footsteps crunching in the snow outside. The dog immediately stood up, his ears perked, and began a low, deep growl at the front door. Escalated into ferocious, non-stop barking. He only ever did this when he saw something real. I remained silent, not wanting to reveal I was home. Then came a slow, hollow, taunting knock on the door. I didn't answer. I slept with the shotgun beside me, the door locked, and the dog at my feet. The next morning, I went outside, and my stomach dropped. Fresh human footprints circled the entire house, stopping at every single window, as if someone had been searching for me. I followed the prints as they led into the forest. After about half a mile, the tracks began to zigzag and loop back, as if the person was trying to cover their trail. Odd feeling told me to turn back. That night, the tapping returned, louder this time. I knew it was him. I unlocked my door, grabbed my shotgun, and stepped out onto the second-story deck. I flipped on the fog lights, illuminating the backyard. And there he was, the same man, with the same smile and dead eyes, holding the knife and staring directly at me. I raised the shotgun and shouted, "If you don't leave, I'll put one right through you." He didn't flinch, just stared, unblinking and grinning. I fired a warning shot into the air. He finally reacted, staggering slightly before slowly backing into the woods, never taking his eyes off me. That's when I decided to unleash the dog. I ran downstairs, threw open the sliding door, and let him loose. He shot into the forest like a black missile, barking and snarling with an aggression I'd never seen. He had a shock collar and couldn't go far, but I like to think he chased that man off for good. After that night, I never saw him again. This took place in March of 2022 during my second year of college. My friends and I, 6 of us in total. 4 guys. The cabin we found was incredibly cheap for its size, boasting 2 stories, a wraparound porch, and 2 bathrooms, all supposedly on private land near a lake. It was extremely remote, miles from any town, and surrounded by forest. The owner, when we spoke on the phone, had a thick accent and seemed a bit odd. He warned us, just don't go wandering too deep into the woods. Some old stuff back there. Busted fences, snakes, you don't want to get turned around. We laughed it off, thinking he was just adding some spooky southern charm. When we arrived, the reality wasn't funny. The drive was long, and our GPS signal died an hour before we got there. The final stretch of road was a narrow dirt and gravel path. As we got closer, the trees grew thicker. The cabin itself did not look like the pictures. It was older, dirtier, with dusty windows and shutters hanging by their hinges. A faint smell of old garbage and wet wood hung in the air. We brushed it off, joking that it added character. We unloaded our things, claimed rooms, and by 7 o'clock p.m., we were drinking. The first night was fun. We grilled, played music on a Bluetooth speaker, and played card games. Around 11 p.m., it got cold and we moved inside. It was then I noticed how profoundly dark the woods were, complete heavy blackness. The porch lights barely penetrated a few feet, and the dense trees felt like they were pressing in on us. There was no sound of bugs or wind, just total silence. We all went to bed around 2:00 a.m. I was in a small ground floor room next to the kitchen, with a window facing the woods. At about 4:15 a.m., I woke up suddenly, my heart pounding as if someone had poked me. Then I heard it, a tap, tap, tap. It was a steady, non-metallic sound, like fingers on glass. I looked at the window and saw a man standing there. His face was pressed against the glass, his skin pale, with wild hair and no shirt. His mouth was slightly open, and his wide eyes stared in without blinking, just stood there, tapping softly and slowly, as if to taunt me. My body felt locked in fear. The tapping grew a little faster. I whispered for Matt, who was asleep on the couch just outside my room. I said his name again, louder. He groggily woke up, and I just pointed. He looked, saw the man, and immediately jumped up, knocking over a coffee table. The noise must have scared the man away, because by the time Matt turned on the porch light and ran outside, he was gone. Everyone woke up, the girls terrified. Tyler tried to rationalize it as a drunk local, and Chris suggested a lost hunter, but I knew that man had been watching me. We blocked the doors, moved the couch in front of the large living room window, and took turns staying awake. Nothing else happened that night. The next morning, we found bare human footprints circling the entire cabin, stopping at every single window, including the small one in the upstairs shower. We should have left then, but being stubborn and dumb, we stayed. The second night began, similarly. Drinks, music, a fire pit, but the mood was tense. Everyone kept glancing at the woods. Jess didn't drink, and Chris kept his hunting knife on his belt. When we went inside, we locked everything. Around 3:30 a.m., Matt went to the kitchen for water. He stopped in the hallway and called my name. I got up and saw him pointing. There was someone in the kitchen. It was the same man, but this time he was inside the house, naked. His back, which was covered in long, raw-looking scratches, was to us. He was standing in front of the refrigerator, just staring at it, swaying slowly on his feet. Matt backed up without a word. We all gathered silently at the entrance to the hallway. I had a pocket knife, Sarah had a fire poker, and Chris had a chair leg he'd broken earlier. We turned on the light, and the man was gone. The back door was wide open, not forced, just open. 20 minutes later, we left. There was no argument. We packed only our essentials, wallets, keys, and phones, and drove until we got a cell signal to call the sheriff. When we met a deputy at a highway diner, he didn't seem surprised. Asked if we were hurt, and then said, "Yeah, we've had some trouble with folks squatting up in those woods. Not always right in the head." We tried to explain that this wasn't just a squatter, that he had watched us, returned 2 nights in a row, and somehow got inside. The deputy just nodded as if he'd heard it all before. When we mentioned the owner, the deputy's expression suggested he knew the man. A few days later, the rental listing for the cabin was wiped from every website. We never got any answers, a call back, or our deposit back. I still see that man's face looking at me through the window when I wake up at night. We don't talk about that trip much anymore, and as far as I know, none of us have been back to South Carolina since.